Hello boys and girls, this is Mrs. Gevert and I'm going to talk to you some more about invertebrates. This is specifically for second grade who's learning more about all of the different groups of invertebrates, and some of these are not ones that Mrs. Shinjek would teach you about, but I just think they're interesting, and since we have some time to learn about them, I thought I'd tell you about them. The first group that we're going to talk about today are flatworms. They're different than what you're thinking of when you think of a worm. This one is taken, a picture of this one is taken in the deep, deep ocean. See how it's transparent? I'm going to show you some more flatworms. So this is the chart we were looking at yesterday. Yesterday we talked about sponges. We talked about the cnidaria, those are the ones that have the stinging cells, and then the ctenophores, which are the comb jellies. Today we're going to talk about flatworms. The scientific name for that group is platyhelmenthes, and some of those are pretty interesting creatures. The first one in the group is the planarian. Planarian are cool. Scientists, you can see by looking at this that you can only see a planarian really with a really good magnifying glass or a microscope. But scientists like them because they have some really interesting characteristics. I'm going to read to you about them, and then I'm going to show you some more pictures. Planarians glide around in ponds and streams. They're pretty small. They're 1/2 centimeter to 2.5 centimeters in length. They eat smaller animals. Even though they have eye spots, they find their food by smell. If you cut a planarian in half, each piece will grow back into a whole animal. So I want to show you some interesting pictures of some planarian. So scientists have learned that these creatures can be cut and they will literally grow back. They'll grow a whole planarian will grow back just from a part. Or if they cut them here, they'll grow like this. Isn't that interesting? Now you can find a planarian almost anywhere. And you can keep one as a pet, actually, if you can see it. It's pretty small. They glide over, it says here that they glide over underwater plants and rocks searching for food. They live in ponds, in streams. I'll show you another picture. So they're not something to be afraid of. They're pretty tiny. They can't hurt you in any way. So here's a picture of somebody's little boy who's walking in a creek or a pond. And these are the planarians. See how tiny they are? One of the things that's cool about them is the way they move. I'm going to read to you from this book. Oh, this book is The Inside Out Stomach, An Introduction to Animals Without Backbones. So here's a planarian. This says its mouth is like the trunk of an elephant or a vacuum cleaner. Another member of the platyhelmenthes is the planarian. This flatworm is called free-living because it does not act as a parasite. In other words, it doesn't hurt you. Most kinds of planarians have a mouth in the center of the front of their bodies, about the spot where your belly button is. Usually the mouth is kept inside the body, but when the planarian feeds, the mouth comes out just like the trunk of an elephant or a small vacuum cleaner. Planarians eat a large variety of living and dead food, and they can be fed tiny pieces of meat in the scientific laboratory. Planarian bodies are so flat that the animals seem to fit the shape of a rock or under the surface upon which they glide. They seem to move without effort on a trail of slime produced by the special cells on the front of the body. It is almost as if they row themselves from place to place on a river of slime with thousands of little oar-like cilia that cover their front. Each cilium is a hair-like part, roughly the shape of one of your eyelashes. There are two very common species of planarians that live in most freshwater ponds. Both kinds are often used in laboratory research because they're so easy to keep. If a planarian is cut into 4 pieces and the pieces are put back into clean pond water, each one will grow into a complete individual. So here's the first one that they caught. They cut him into 4 pieces and he grew back into 4 complete planarian. And this book goes on to tell us more. I guess it doesn't. Oh, another part of the group of flatworms is not so nice. They're the ones that can make your dog sick. If you've ever give your dog heartworm medicine, it's one of the reasons that you do give your dog heartworm medicine or even tapeworm medicine, because these flatworms can get inside of animals and make them sick. Okay, so I'm going to show you. So we're in the group flatworms, and we talked about the planarian. That was the one I just told you about, and we talked about the icky tapeworm that can make animals sick. But the one we haven't talked about in this group of platyhelmenthes is the marine flatworms. They're actually really beautiful, and they live in the ocean. That was the one I showed you when we first started. That was transparent and lived in the deep sea. So this one says, some marine flatworms are brightly colored and free swimming. Others are camouflaged and blend in with their surroundings. Marine flatworms eat snails, barnacles, limpets, and other small animals. Now I have some pictures of some marine flatworms that I want to show you. Now these are roundworms. We're going to talk about those next. But here are our flatworms. This is just called a black and yellow flatworm for obvious reasons. Flowers, flatworm. Gold speckled flatworm. And these are called flatworms, but these are planaria. Okay, this one's kind of cool. And then you can tell this is the icky one that lives inside of an animal's belly and makes them sick. Okay, lots of different kinds of flatworms. So those are from the group called platyhelmenthes. One thing that's interesting to me, at least, is that these words, like the long word platyhelmenthes, it means something. Platy, flat, helmenthes, worm. So scientists can remember what they're doing. Now the next group of animals that we're going to talk about are, again, not very exciting when you think about animals, but they're important. These are the roundworms. Now we're still not at the kinds of worms you think of when you think of a worm. When you think of a worm, you're actually thinking of an annelid, a segmented worm up here. We're talking about a different kind of worm. These are called roundworms. They're very, very simple creatures. We started our animal kingdom with the most simple. These creatures don't even have symmetry. And then each line gets more and more complex in terms of their structure. So these animals really don't even have much of a digestive tract. But the roundworms do. They're sort of a tube within a tube. And they're called nematodes. Nematodes. So now we're on this group right here. Nematodes are pretty cool. I'm going to read to you. Roundworms, or nematodes, are cylindrical, they're like a cylinder, animals with a tube within a tube body. The outside tube is their body wall, which has a tough covering. The inside tube is their digestive tract. They have a mouth at one end. Muscles run the length of their body, so roundworms move with a thrashing motion. Now nematodes, which is where the group name comes from, nematoda, are found everywhere. Like if you walked outside and just got a scoop of dirt from outside your house, and you could look at it under a really strong microscope, see the difference between the magnifying glass and the microscope. It takes a strong microscope. There'd be thousands in just that scoop of dirt. They're what make the decomposing of our soil work. They're microscopic, little teeny tiny worms that do a lot of the work in the soil. Now there's one in particular that doesn't live in the soil. It lives in, this is the reason it's in this pink, is it's in the muscle of an animal, and it makes that animal very sick, and it would make any animal, so for example, if this was inside the muscle of a pig, and if another creature ate that pig, the other creature would get sick too, and that's called trichnia. So how people would get trichnosis. So there are some that are pretty nasty, but most of them live in the soil and do good work to take care of decomposing things. So those are nematodes. Okay, now these are my favorites. Well, my favorites for today. I got lots of favorites. These are the rotifers. These are really cool. Now I want you to, again, see how tiny they are. So we're talking microscopic creatures that you've never seen before. When they first invented microscopes and they were looking at pond water, these creatures were fascinating. And I want to show you some more about them. But first I'm going to read to you about why they got their name, rotifer. The rotifer word means they have wheels. So it's wheelbearer. Rotifers have a fringe of cilia on their head that resembles a rotating wheel. They use the cilia to swim and to gather food. Rotifers have a brain, an eye spot, and a mouth with grinding jaws, and a digestive system. They are transparent, so it is easy to observe what's in their bellies. So if they eat some plants, you can see the green going right through them. Now, rotifers are either swimming rotifers or what they call sessile rotifers. These are ones that build themselves a little tube, and they live inside the tube, and the tube is attached to a rock or the bottom of the pond or wherever they are, and they kind of hide in the tube, and then they come out and feed, and then they go back in. It's almost like their little protective coating. So I want to show you some more pictures of some rotifers because they're super cool. So here we go. I'm in a book called Pond Water Zoo, An Introduction to Microscopic Life. See a little theme in my books, probably. Same author for lots of them. All right, I want to read to you a little bit about rotifers. Okay, before we go on, I just want you to see this. A rotifer walks wheel over foot. So it kind of does a cartwheel. It flips. Floop, 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 floop. That's how it moves. And then these are the kind that build a house and stick. And then they come out and they feed, and then they go back in. All right. Rotifers are found out in lakes, along pond bottoms, in puddles, in bird baths, and even with the bacteria that's in your cat's water bowl. Rotifers prefer clean water, but you can also find rotifers by taking a little bit of dirt from a garden or park and mixing it with clean water. The rotifer, commonly found in pond water, has a cylindrical body with a head bearing its wheels. There is a middle section called a trunk. Rotifers either swim through the water using their cilia, or they sometimes somersault along head over foot, or in this case, wheel over foot. This shows the two different kinds. The kind that swim along by themselves and the kind that stay still. Now here's the picture of the body. So somebody had a microscope and they looked really up close at the rotifer. Trying to make sure that you can see that really well. I just think that's cool. So this is his mouth, and these little things go round and round and round and round and round, and they sort of suck in the food that they need, and then they can go heel over toe. All right. So those are the three groups that we learned about today. They're not the typical groups you think of when you're studying animals. Flatworms, called platyhelmenthes, nematodes, and rotifers. I bet if you said to somebody, I learned about animals today, I learned about rotifers, they probably wouldn't know what you were talking about. Now remember, all of these creatures, way up to the last row over here, have no bones. These are the only creatures that have bones right here at the very end. All of these are what? What's the word for all of those? I hope you know. Invertebrates. All right, boys and girls. I'll tell you about the rest of them next time.